So welcome. What we're going to cover today is the purpose of Mickel therapy. We're going to discuss the new neural pathway diagram, which explains what goes wrong, how it goes wrong. We're going to look at emotions in more detail, specifically primary emotions today, and also the 6 groups of emotions. We're going to look at the fact that what Mickel therapy aims to do is facilitate recovery from fatigue and chronic pain conditions. There are other conditions that Mickel therapy can help, but these are the main ones we've been focusing on over the last 15 years. As children, we're accidentally raised to believe we need to look outside of ourselves for answers to ill health. It's just things like when we fall and your mother kind of picks you up, rubs your leg better, or if it's more serious, takes you to the doctor. We grow up thinking that that's what we do. What we know is the foundation for good health, energy and well-being is good information about the mind-body connection, in which medicine is usually treated as unconnected. So this is what we need to do, connect the two together. In Mickel, we intend to inspire people to find their own answers from within ourselves, and we achieve this with a set of tools and initial guidance which facilitate a return to health. The tools and guidance given allow a lifelong freedom from severe symptoms. So what we aim to do in Mickel is get the two intelligences within us, which is how we view it, the thinking brain and the emotional brain, to start working together better as a team. We're all very aware of our thinking brain, and indeed it's the dominant intelligence. It's where we make sense of our world and what's going on around us and make decisions. However, we've got this very important guiding intelligence, which is the emotional brain, which is just that. It's meant to guide us, but nobody has taught us that, or almost nobody has taught us that. I certainly was brought up to believe I should be in control of my emotions, rather than see them as a useful guide and something that will protect me in my life. When I became ill with symptoms, I just looked for a physical cause. It never entered my head that it could be anything to do with my emotional brain or my emotional brain centres. We're going to think about the fact that research has long shown the existence of the emotional brain. And the emotional brain, as I said earlier, has the initial role of using our past experiences to guide us. This is communicated to the thinking brain in the form of a primary emotion, and we should view that as a useful and positive call to take action. The action should be appropriate for the situation that we find ourselves in. So the emotional brain and the thinking brain need to learn to work together as a team. The interesting thing about it is they'll both have an opinion and they won't always agree. The emotional brain is never wrong, because what it does is generate instinctual responses to the situations we find ourselves in. But they are emotions, and emotions aren't clear. They don't speak in words like the thoughts that come from our thinking brain. So therefore they're open to interpretation and therefore misinterpretation. So we don't always get the actions right because we don't always understand what the call to action is. There's so much information to give out. I think in total what I feel when I'm kind of doing the therapy sessions is it probably takes about 5 hours in total to go through everything we've learned in Mickel therapy, both from working with people, from Dr. Mickel, our founder, from working with people, and from the latest research about the emotional brain and the thinking brain and how they're meant to work together. So in the next slide, we're going to look at this in more detail. So this is the role of the emotional brain. So a good way to think about it is, as we go about our daily lives, the emotional brain has got a really important role to play. And it's to make sure that we're safe physically and safe emotionally. It goes way back, the emotional brain is an ancient part of the brain, which would have evolved as we evolved, and probably originally it was more about physical safety. But in our modern life, it's more about emotional safety. We're not very often in physical danger. So how it does this is, whatever's happening to us, whatever we're doing, or even thinking about doing, the emotional brain wants to make sure it's safe and that it's good for us. It will access our past experiences or long-term memories, and probably other information stored in the brain as well, to guide us today. It will then generate in Mickel what we call a primary emotion. And what we mean by that is the emotions that arise before thought. In kind of everyday language, we would call it our gut instinct or our intuition. So that primary emotion is sent to the thinking brain that we can think about what action to take. This is where the two need to start working together better. In Mickel, we say what we next need to do is apply the 4 A's, and that's become aware of how we feel, acknowledge how we feel, accept how we feel, and then act upon it. Now, as long as that action is appropriate, then what results is health, energy, and well-being. And we've highlighted that pathway in green because this is the ideal. This is what we would hope to be doing in most of our situations every day. However, this isn't always what happens because, as I mentioned earlier, emotions aren't clear. They don't speak in words like our thoughts, and we've been taught to be stoic. Put your head down, get on with things, don't rock the boat, don't make noise, chin up, stiff up a lip, button it, put a lid on it. All these sayings that are in our everyday language, and they vary from culture to culture, but all of these sayings actually accidentally teach us to suppress our primary emotion. When that happens, the thinking brain redirects the primary emotion back to the emotional brain, which sends it to the hypothalamus. That's the red line. This is a protective response. It's a protective mechanism. It's there to protect us. So the energy of the emotion is sent into the hypothalamus in order to overwork it, in order to generate symptoms of illness to get our attention. The emotional brain doesn't mean to make us ill. It's just got a very limited way of getting our attention. Can't speak in words like our thoughts, so we'd be nuts. But what it will do is it will first of all speak to us with emotions, and if we miss the emotion or we accidentally don't find the most appropriate action, it will then overwork the hypothalamus in order to generate symptoms of illness to guide us. Now, the unfortunate thing about that is, as I said earlier, we have been taught to think of symptoms of illness as something that you suppress with medication or rest. There's all sorts of ways we've accidentally been taught to deal with symptoms, rather than see them as a useful course to take action. Now, I'm not talking about symptoms like, pleurisy or pneumonia, where clearly, we need medical intervention. What I am talking about are the symptoms that come from an overworked hypothalamus. And as the hypothalamus is responsible for homeostasis in the body, they can be all sorts of things, but they really focus around fatigue, immune system dysfunction, gut dysfunction. But we will be covering that more fully later in this series of videos. So the way out of this is to work back from the symptoms to the primary emotion and follow that green, healthy neural pathway to health.